Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Draw with T. Today we got something kind of special. So this is another anatomy study, but this time it is happening in 100% speed. So that's right, you guys are going to watch me draw this at the same speed as I experienced it, which normally only happens in gesture videos. So I hope if any of you are following along, this gives you some kind of worth and value to it. Honestly, I am kind of just letting it be as 100% speed because I could speed it up a little bit, but I what's the point of speeding up 150% and making it, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. Like, I know longer videos tend to do a little better. This is a little longer than what I like for content like this, but I'm gonna try something different. Let me know, guys, if you like this kind of 100% speed video, or if it's a little slow to you. I find it a little slow, but I still wanted to try this out. So here you can see me warming up. I'm just drawing some of the drawings in Michael Hampton's figure drawing book. These are just little doodles that are, scattered on this sort of loose page that he did. And I'm just following along with the loose page. There's no instructions here, really. I left this whole footage basically as is, so you're going to see me pause and consider things as I would have considered them. I didn't dally too much with this. Sometimes when I'm doing art, I'll just stare at it for 2 minutes, and nobody needs to see that nothingness happening. But here I was pretty dynamic. What I'm doing is basically a big full-page drawing of what kind of focuses on the arm and a little bit of the pectoralis muscle and all that. You can kind of see the image there on the left, although there's another image overlapping it, so it's a little bit awkward. But yeah, so here I'm just kind of blocking things out, starting with the main mass of the pectoralis, and then I've got a line there to kind of show where the arm's going to be. And what's interesting about this drawing is it kind of tackles one of the things that I find I have a lot of trouble with, which is the forearm. And it presents me with an angle that's very common for artists to draw, but one that I have never seen done, and I've never seen it, with the anatomy. Obviously I've seen it in pictures, but, getting to see such a skilled artist as Michael Hampton kind of give this image, and I can see, whoops, excuse my head, basically being able to see how he does it and the muscles that he presents was very helpful for me. I don't think it's enough to utterly solve my problem, but it's definitely kind of opened me up to seeing, what's kind of happening there. And even though it's still kind of gobbledygook to me, it was helpful to see, okay, this muscle kind of curves around here and this one does this. Now here I'm just starting off with the deltoid and the bicep, and I kind of wish that I'd move the camera so you could see the image on the left, because I do start off very slow here and methodical, and I was just making myself go slow because I tend to be a very fast, impatient artist, and I don't always correct my mistakes, or by the time I think about correcting my mistakes, I've already gone much too deep, much too dark, and I no longer care, and I'm just frustrated and I just want to move on. So here I was trying to be a bit more methodical. It was actually very nice drawing at this size. It's very unfamiliar to me. You can see here I'm moving less my wrist and more my elbow, which is kind of what you're supposed to do in art. Honestly, in art, you should be always moving your shoulder, is what they say, but the only people that say that are usually fine artists and, very, very large painterly artists that are working at an easel. And here I'm just, picking at a sketchbook page with a HB pencil. Nothing fancy. I was also holding the pencil like that, not just because that's how you kind of do it, but also because it was a very short pencil and there was no way it was really gonna feel comfortable in my hand. I do kind of apologize for how boring this part is going to be, but I do promise it will pick up and it'll be a lot more interesting. So here you can kind of see the focus is actually more on the arm. That was a bit of a weird sentence, sorry. It made more sense in my head before I spewed it out. But what I mean is, like the forearm and the upper arm, you can kind of see happening here. And I was kind of trying to focus on the transition between the two, if that makes sense. There's a lot of muscles happening here, and I really wish I'd shown more of the original shot, because then you guys could really see and compare how well I did. So once more, like I said, I'm just taking my time trying to find those muscles, which in the forearm is very confusing and very hard to do, just because there's so many of them, and the moment that arm turns over, it's suddenly a new foreign landscape for me anyways. But the upper arm makes a lot more sense. You know, here I'm working on the bicep, and above that it's the deltoid, and peeking out behind that's the one of the tricep heads, and you know, it makes a lot of sense. But in Hampton's original drawing, he kind of does it, I believe, in some kind of oily pastel or some kind of chalk pastel. So he's got these very dark lines and these very thick lines, and then also kind of these sort of faded out hints of color and all that happening. So I was trying to get some of that happening. He also had contour or lines that followed the form that sort of kind of revealed it and spoke to it, and I was trying to be careful to get those in. He's also had a lot of drawings through drawings happening here, you know, like there were little lines and things, little notes that seemed important, but I couldn't quite understand what they were trying to do, what they were trying to say, so I kind of included them anyways. Little arrows pointing here and there, little circles and stuff. So I was, even though it was incorrect, I was drawing his original reference lines, or rather the first lines he would have drawn. I was drawing those after most of the drawing was done, which you probably shouldn't do, but I did it anyways. I thought about leaving that sort of stuff out, but I ultimately decided to include it and leave it in, because, you know, you never know when those sort of notes are suddenly going to make sense to you and you're going to want them to be there. You know, I don't always know what's important when I'm drawing another artist's thing, especially if it's got all the construction lines in it from before. You know, I don't really know where they started and where they ended unless they have a video provided, then I could follow along with that. Alright, like I said, things start to get a little bit more interesting here as I have grabbed a black Prismacolor and I started outlining some of the forms now. There's a prime example of me drawing things that I didn't need to be there for me to draw, you know, my version of it, but I drew it in there anyways. And this is one of the reasons why I like using a black pencil crayon. You could see there I got a nice little shade line. I'm not very good at that sort of stuff, but I was very proud of some of the shade lines that I did here. And there I'm just putting in the clavicle, you know, and detailing a bit more of the pectoralis muscle. This is all stuff I've covered before, but, you know, the gaps since I last did it, you know, it's always nice to have a bit of a refresher. And here I kind of was starting to understand a few more elements of the pectoralis, like seeing how it tucks into the upper arm, which I never knew that it did. Never knew until I started studying Hampton's book. So, you know, you do learn some stuff. And here I am now adding some more of the lines to the torso. Originally when I was doing this page, I was actually debating about drawing it exactly as Hampton had drawn it there on the left. And you can kind of see a folded kind of arm. Basically it's like an arm folded, so you can see like the elbow and stuff. And I was actually thinking about drawing that right over this torso, right as he'd kind of done it there. And I ultimately decided not to. Partially because I didn't trust myself not to accidentally overlap things of actual real importance, and also because it just didn't seem right. Like I wanted these studies to be very clear and very precise, so I decided to draw that at a later date. And now here you can see I'm starting to add some contour lines. These are all straight out of what Hampton details. These I think actually turned out really well. I'm quite proud of myself actually for drawing these. A little bit of shading too with the black, and we'll get back in there with the color. You know, there I am kind of carving things out, adding shadow before I even do the line. I was kind of having fun at this point with this study. taking my time. And I honestly thought it took a lot longer than it did. I thought it took way more than nearly 17 minutes. It felt like maybe a half an hour had gone by or something, but I'm surprised by how fast some of these studies can go. I remember doing an entire body kind of strutting forward, made out of anatomy shapes, and I remember that study not taking me very long to do either. But then there are these studies that I do that are a lot smaller, and a lot more on a page, and those can take quite a while. So it's kind of interesting to think about, and I've thought about now after doing this and the one before that maybe what I should be doing is, drawing these studies at a much bigger size, even bigger than what Hampton shows, and really just focusing in on, drawing bigger and showing that mass and stuff, because it's fun and the results are indeed good, and that's not the first time that an artist has told me that. Often artists will tell me, the bigger you draw, the more detail you can get in there, it just looks better. And I kind of have to agree, to be honest, now that I've kind of done it a few times, and they might have been fluke times. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, it's good results. And for some reason, we're not going to be detailing that part of the hand, or not the hand, but the wrist. So it's just kind of a block shape that a bunch of things are inserting into. I'm not sure if that'll be covered later down the line, or if it's just, since it doesn't really have muscle or anything, it's just kind of not included. The problem with anatomy for artists is unlike anatomy for doctors, in which case the answer of what do I need to know is always everything. With artists, it's a little bit more complicated. Obviously, we do learn the names of certain muscles and stuff, but nobody's gonna kill you if you can't name all the bones in the all of the carpal bones in the hand, or all the tarsal bones in the foot. That stuff isn't so important. People will look at you weird if you don't know your biceps from your triceps, if you don't know where the iliad crest is, or the great trochanter, or whatever. That sort of stuff is important to know, but those are kind of landmarks, very obvious visible things that you are going to be drawing through the forms of the skin. So, it's good to know. But in terms of like the nervous system and, where all the veins and stuff are, it's not something we need to know. So sometimes you pick up anatomy books and they either give too much information or not enough. I've never picked up a medical book, but I imagine that it would be far too much detail, and also not detailing anything that, that kind of applies for an artist. Anyways, here I am finally getting to color, and here, this was my reward after drawing this, and I really had fun with it. I didn't just splodge color in, I kind of tried to model it after the way Hampton did. And there were some strange things here, like you'll notice how I'm adding this sort of red shape here, and that was, I think, done by Hampton to kind of denote how the bicep kind of goes in past the deltoid, like it does go past, and that was something to consider. And here I'm taking a little break to either gather my pencil crayons or take a sip of some tea. I often drink some kind of tea or a hot beverage as I work on anatomy and stuff. It helps keep me sat, because ADHD, sometimes I don't want to do my studies and it's very easy to wander off, but if you give me a hot tea and sit me down and start the camera rolling, it's a lot easier. Here again, you see me drawing through the forms, and here I'm not entirely sure what I'm really drawing, but Hampton kind of uses a color coding system throughout the whole book, but given that there are limited colors, sometimes he'll use, for example, blue in two areas, and it gets a little confusing with the forearm and the upper arm, because he uses the blue for both one of the tricep heads, and then also he uses the blue for one of the lower muscles there. And the lower arm muscles are very, very confusing and it's very hard for me to memorize them. I don't think I ever properly have, although it's something I kind of want to, or at least I want to know the major bodies of. Anyways, we're actually getting quite near the end here. Oh, I think that's the shadow of me taking a sip of my tea. But as I said, we're getting actually kind of near the end here. I don't actually really have a lot to say. I think I'm basically actually done. Here I'm just kind of doing some lines in the pectoralis to kind of show feature me how the striations of the muscle work, because that's kind of something that's a little difficult for me to wrap my head around. Although now I'm kind of understanding what Hampton meant about like a folded up fan for this muscle. And if you remember, that was like my first episode ever recording the pectoralis muscle, and I was like, what is this nonsense? What is this guy talking about? Starting to get it just a little bit more, just a little inkling that there's something more there. I wouldn't say I fully understand it, but there's a little bit more happening in my head now, you could say. But anyways, this is basically it, guys. This is the end. I'm going to show you this in macro here in a second. So like, comment, and subscribe if you guys haven't already, and I will see you in the next episode.